Everyone. I left off on my last video talking about my decision to retire. And as I mentioned, it was an arduous process, as anything with the federal government tends to be. So, for those of you that apply for Medicare or Medicaid, you kind of know the whole regime there. But after a couple months of getting medical notes and getting reasonable accommodation notes, getting letters from my supervisor, and showing that I was unable to work, I finally, in March of 24, sent off my completed application. And I had heard horror stories about it would take anywhere from, 6 to 18 months. So I was kind of dug in for the long haul, thinking, maybe by the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th, maybe it would get processed. Give me one more fire season to try to earn some extra money. And no, I'm not out digging fire line in my condition. Haven't dug fire line in probably 30 years. And administrative. So sit in an office and can kind of pick my own hours and my own days if with a good team, which I am. So I kind of figured, all right, sent my husband on a train ride after my next chemo, and so he could go see his ailing dad. Got home, um, actually spent the night, and the next morning I was up early and I was doing some work on my computer. Story of my life, it doesn't matter if I'm on days off or medical, I'm still working. And I had a note from the HR group saying, your application's incomplete. And, we went through it page by page by page. And so I found that really hard to believe. She said, you are missing your social security, application. And I had included a letter I received from Social Security saying that I did not qualify at the time because I was still employed. And so I resent that letter and didn't even get a response. I think it was kind of an oopsie on the gal's part. And this was like a Friday. So I went home and kind of kicked back for the weekend. My husband wasn't around. I spent it recovering because I had chemo that time on Thursdays, and got up early on Monday morning and again logged into my computer first thing to see if there was any crises that happened over the weekend while I wasn't feeling well. And I get pinged by my HR counselor, and he asked me, "Are you still in work status?" And I said, "Well, obviously, because I'm on Teams, which I wouldn't be able to access if I wasn't still federal employed." And I say, "Yes, I am. I was just out last week for a few days for appointments." And he said, "Well, your application's been approved." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, a couple pay periods from now." "Oh, no, this Friday, end of this pay period," which was 5 days from then. Wow, head was spinning. And if you're wondering how I was able to be so effective in getting essentially my application done in just, or approved in just a few weeks, because I didn't get notification that it had been sent off to a different office that dealt specifically with these retirement packets until middle of April. And this is the first week of May. But what I did, advice to anyone, if you're applying for Social Security, disability, Medicare, Medicaid, and you're finding you're kind of struggling, is reach out to your congressman or congresswoman, your representative for your district, and ask them for help. And that's exactly what I did. And lo and behold, my application got through faster than anyone's ever seen in their life. So go Senator Crapo. So on May 4th of 2024, I retired officially, and I haven't worked since. So it has been 18 months since I retired, and it was really the best decision I could have made for not only myself, but my family, my team that I was supervising, the stress levels that I was dealing with. And I walked away. I still had a lot of recovery to do, and I was still going in to get chemo once every 3 weeks. So it's May of 24, and retired for 2 weeks, and my father-in-law passes. And we were expecting it to some degree, but it was still, devastating. He was, like a second father to me, just a great, great, great man. And it kind of just took the wind out of my sails. But then I realized, like, I don't have to worry about work. I had just finished doing chemo. We got in the car and we drove back. And I didn't have to worry about missing anything. I didn't have to worry about checking emails. I could be fully engaged with the family as they were grieving through the loss of their father, their brother, their grandfather, etc. So that's a perk. The ability for me to be able to actually take time to recover after every chemo scan, whatnot, was huge. I didn't realize how much of a strain I'd been putting on myself to try to do it all and do it all at 100%. I didn't want to fail at anything. I didn't want to fail in my job. I didn't want to fail as a patient. I didn't want to fail as a family member. I didn't want to fail as a friend. And so I was trying to do everything and I couldn't. 6 months after my father-in-law passed, I get a call from my dad on Thanksgiving Day that my mother had fallen and broken her femur. Mom had been suffering from so many strokes for many years, and the doctors had told her avoid anesthesia at all costs. Well, obviously, if your femur's broken, you're not gonna go on living with that. And so the day after Thanksgiving, Mom went in for surgery, told the surgeon if something happens while I'm under, just let me be. I don't want you to do any life saving. Well, she did find under, and she came into recovery, and she woke up in recovery, but then immediately slid back under. And the doctors feel that she probably had a couple major strokes while she was trying to get out of anesthesia, that kind of that second go around. And that was kind of all they wrote. Mom ended up passing at the end of February. I was able to go back a couple times. I was able to go back before she had fallen. I was able to go back after she had fallen, and I was able to go back right after she had passed. So, and I look back and again, I still cry missing my mom, but I look back and think if I was working, like, would I have been able to go see mom in October before she fell? Would I have been able to go in January to help dad? Would I have been able to go back in February just, to say, essentially my goodbyes and help dad and everything else? Would I have been able to go back in June for the memorial that was held? And I don't think I could have done all of it. I definitely wouldn't have gone back in October. I probably would have gone in January. I don't know if I would have been able to go back even in February after she passed, and I would have made, it a priority to make sure that I was there for the memorial. So if you're contemplating whether continuing to work is a really good idea, if you can financially swing it, even if it is a little of a belt tightening, I think it is well worth it, but it is your decision. For me, it was the best decision I have made since marrying my husband, to be perfectly honest. So there were no regrets there. Now, this is a total going a little off the tracks. I'm really good at going off the tracks, but I mentioned I went to Mom's Memorial. Well, my mom and dad have both donated their bodies to the University of Minnesota, where they live, nearby, for the medical college. And if you have that opportunity and you're not wanting your family to be put out by a large expense for a huge funeral or coffins or cremation or a service or whatever you think they might want or you might want, but if this is a path you want to take, it was amazing. So mom passed. They came and they collected her body at the extended care unit she was staying at. They got the death certificates filled out and sent in. They contacted Social Security. They contacted my dad a few weeks after they had collected the body. They were done with doing whatever they needed to do, which was, teaching medical students, doing some research on it, looking at different things. And they asked dad, did my mom want to be cremated or did she want to be embalmed? And dad said, no, I want her cremated. And they're like, all right. A couple weeks later, he gets a box in the mail, mom ashes essentially. And a couple weeks after that, he gets an invitation to attend a memorial being hosted by the University of Minnesota for all the families of the donors. And so I was able to go back for that, and it was incredible. So big kudos to the University of Minnesota on how you handle that um, that memorial service. They had over 700 people donated their bodies, I think 752 people. They went through kind of a really quick slideshow of everybody with a picture and their name. There were some really silly pictures that made people laugh. They played taps for, um, sorry, I have to pause for just a second. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, like they did such an amazing job. The School of Medicine was broken up into several colleges, one being the College of Dentistry, one being the College of Mortuary, one being like the College of Medical Science. And, all the students from all those different colleges got an opportunity to work on these donors. And each dean came up and spoke about it, and the dean of dentistry, which I never even thought of dentistry being used with cadavers, talked about how a couple of years previous they had found a new nerve in the jaw that they hadn't known about before. So that was pretty cool. They played taps for the veterans, which my mom is one, and so is my dad. They had the medical students, a handful of them, play musical instruments. So here's these super smart people in medical school, and they were like amazing musicians. I mean, you would have thought you were sitting in a college of music ceremony, not a college of medicine or school of medicine. And there was a harpist, there was a cellist, a violinist, a piano, a singer, a guitarist, and they all just did the most amazing job. And they had students directing you to where you needed to go. They had shuttles taking you from the free parking ramps to the university where the ceremony was being held. And then afterwards, they had cookies and coffee and lemonade and milk set out for everybody. And again, everybody has their own choices on how they want to handle their funeral or their passing. But if that's kind of the way you would like to go, look at your local universities that have a College of Medicine and see if they take those types of donations and how it works for with them. So that is kind of a quick summary of what happened within the first 6 months of my retirement. And while I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to retire when I did, and kind of one of those dorks that always believes something happens for a reason, and that something was the reason was that I could be there for my parents who were passing away, and I hit the wrong button. But all I was going to say, and are now widowed, and so very alone. And I was glad that I was able to be there for that. All right, until the next video, let you know how I'm still faring with retirement and chemo treatments.